For years, one currency has ruled the world. But that dominance is now fading. According to the IMF, the dollar's share of global reserves has dropped sharply from nearly 70% to just 57%. And this war could accelerate the fall. Right now, a dangerous conflict is unfolding in the Middle East. Tensions between Israel and Iran have escalated rapidly, with direct strikes, growing retaliation, and the risk of a much wider war. This is no longer just a regional confrontation, because both sides sit at the center of one of the most critical regions in the world, a region that controls a massive share of global oil and energy supply. And as this conflict intensifies, the risks are spreading far beyond the battlefield. Oil prices are reacting, markets are becoming unstable, and governments around the world are preparing for a potential economic shock. Because if this war expands further, it won't just impact the Middle East. It could disrupt global trade, destabilize economies, and push the world closer to a financial crisis. And that's exactly why this conflict is being watched so closely. This war is different, not because of who is fighting, but because of where it's happening. At the center of this conflict lies one of the most critical arteries of the global economy, the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water just a few miles wide. Yet every single day, nearly 20 million barrels of oil pass through it. That's about 1/5 of the world's total oil supply. And here's the problem. There is no real backup route. If this passage is disrupted, even for a short time, the impact would be immediate. Global supply would tighten, and prices would surge. But it doesn't stop there. Further south lies another choke point, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Smaller but still critical. Roughly 6% of the world's seaborne oil flows through this route. And now, that region is also under pressure. So this isn't just a war zone anymore. It's a pressure point for the entire global economy. Because the modern world runs on a system that depends on constant flow. Oil moving, ships sailing, supply chains running without interruption. A system built for speed, not for shocks. And that's exactly why markets react so fast. Because in today's economy, even the threat of disruption is enough. Prices don't wait for supply to collapse. They move on fear, on uncertainty, on what might happen next. And when that fear spreads, it doesn't stay in one region. It moves across markets, across countries, and across the entire global economy. Oil still runs the modern world, not just as fuel for cars or planes, but as the foundation of the entire global economy. The world consumes over 100 million barrels of oil every single day. And that oil powers transportation, manufacturing, and global trade. But it also goes into plastics, fertilizers, and countless everyday products. Which means this isn't just about energy. Oil sits underneath everything. And here's the problem. In the short term, demand for oil doesn't change easily. Countries still need to move goods. Factories still need to run. So when supply gets disrupted, demand doesn't fall. Prices rise. And they rise fast. Even a relatively small shock can have massive consequences. A 10% disruption in oil supply can push inflation up by around 2 percentage points and cut global economic growth by up to 1%. That's how a single energy shock turns into a global economic problem. This is where the dominoes start falling. When oil prices rise, it doesn't stay limited to energy. Food becomes more expensive. Transport costs increase. Shipping slows down. And factories start paying more to produce the same goods. One price increase spreads across the entire system. And the first place it shows up is inflation. Prices rise across the economy. And suddenly, everything becomes more expensive. And when inflation rises, central banks are forced to react. They raise interest rates. Borrowing becomes more expensive. Spending slows down. And growth begins to weaken. We've seen this before. During the 1973 oil shock, U.S. inflation surged above 12%, and the economy was pushed into recession. And today, the situation is even more fragile. Central banks are already dealing with higher interest rates, which means another oil-driven shock could force even tighter policies and make economic growth much harder to sustain. This is how it happens. One disruption triggers a chain reaction that spreads across the entire global economy. The US dollar is still the center of the global financial system, but that dominance is no longer as strong as it once was. For decades, the dollar has been the world's primary reserve currency, used in global trade, energy markets, and international finance. But the numbers are slowly changing. The dollar still makes up around 56 to 58% of global foreign exchange reserves. But that's down from nearly 72% in the early 2000s. And more recent data shows that share slipping even further. It's a gradual shift, but an important one, because the system itself is built on trust. And that trust is now being tested. Oil is still mostly traded in dollars, but some countries are beginning to explore alternatives. Small shifts, but with big implications. Because if more trade starts moving outside the dollar, global demand for it begins to weaken. And that creates pressure. Less demand means higher borrowing costs for the United States, and a financial system that becomes more fragile over time. The dollar is still powerful, but in a world facing rising conflict and uncertainty, even the strongest system can begin to show cracks. So where does this go next? There are three possible paths. If the conflict stays contained, the impact may be limited. A temporary spike in oil prices, and some short-term pressure on inflation. But if the situation escalates, the consequences become much more serious. Oil prices could jump by 50 to 60%. Inflation could rise by 2 to 3%. And major economies could begin to slow down, or even slip into recession. And then there's the worst-case scenario. A full regional disruption, where supply chains break, and oil prices surge past $150 a barrel. At that point, global inflation could rise by 3 to 5%, and the world economy could face a deep recession. That is the breaking point. Not just a regional conflict, but a global economic shock. One that hits everything at once. Markets, inflation, debt, and growth. And when that happens, the question is no longer whether the world will feel it, but how severe the impact will be. This is how modern crises unfold. Not in isolation, but in chains. A war triggers an energy shock. An energy shock drives inflation. Inflation pressures entire economies. And slowly, the system begins to strain. What we're seeing right now may not be the collapse itself, but the warning signs of one. And history has shown these moments don't stay contained for long. If you found this breakdown useful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And hit the bell icon to stay updated, because the story isn't over yet. This is America Explained.